The book of Exodus is one of the most amazing and exciting stories in the Bible. It's not just about the big, scary plagues or the sea that splits in half, but a story about people who were slaves and wanted to be free. Imagine this, a whole group of people who work so hard every day and wish for a better life. One day, God hears their cries and chooses a man named Moses, who used to live in the palace, to help them. Moses is a little scared at first, but God shows him some incredible miracles, like turning rivers into blood and sending frogs everywhere. Eventually, after many signs from God, the king called Pharaoh finally lets the people go. But that's not the end. The story of Exodus is also about a promise from God, guiding these people to a new home and teaching them how to trust Him. Are you ready to dive into this amazing adventure? As we continue on this journey, I encourage you to smash the like button, subscribe to my channel, and most especially, turn on the bell notification so that YouTube will send you a notification anytime I drop an amazing video. A long time ago, Jacob and his family moved to Egypt. Jacob had 12 sons, and each son started his own family. Over the years, Jacob's family grew very large, and they became known as the Israelites. They were happy and strong, with many children and grandchildren, until they numbered in the thousands. Then, a new king called Pharaoh came to power in Egypt. He didn't know about Joseph, Jacob's son, who had once been important in Egypt. Pharaoh noticed that the Israelites were becoming stronger and feared they might join Egypt's enemies in a war. To control them, he decided to make the Israelites his slaves. The Egyptians forced them to work hard, building cities and performing difficult tasks. Despite the harsh treatment, the Israelites continued to grow in number. Pharaoh became even more frightened and devised a cruel plan. He ordered the Hebrew midwives to kill all newborn baby boys, but let the girls live. However, the midwives feared God and did not follow Pharaoh's orders, allowing the baby boys to live instead. When Pharaoh learned of this, he was furious and commanded that all baby boys born to the Israelites be thrown into the river. During this sad time, a woman from the tribe of Levi gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She loved him dearly and tried to hide him to protect him from being thrown into the river. For 3 months, she kept him hidden, but eventually, she could no longer do so. She made a special basket from reeds, coated it with tar to keep it afloat, and placed her baby inside. Then, she set the basket among the tall grasses by the river. The baby's sister, Miriam, watched from a distance to see what would happen. Soon, Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river to bathe. She spotted the basket and sent one of her servants to fetch it. When she opened it and saw the crying baby, she felt pity and said, "This must be one of the Hebrew babies." Bravely, Miriam approached Pharaoh's daughter and asked, "Would you like me to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for you?" Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam ran to get her mother. Pharaoh's daughter told the mother, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the mother cared for her own baby. When he was older, she returned him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son and named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." As Moses grew up, he noticed how badly his people, the Israelites, were treated. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite and was filled with anger. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, then struck the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. The next day, Moses found 2 Israelites fighting and tried to intervene. One of them asked, "Who made you our ruler and judge? Are you going to kill me like you did the Egyptian?" Realizing that others knew what he had done, Moses became frightened. When Pharaoh heard about it, he sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled to a distant land called Midian. In Midian, Moses worked as a shepherd for his father-in-law, Jethro, who was the priest of Midian. One day, while leading his sheep to Mount Horeb, he saw something extraordinary, a bush that was on fire but not burning up. Curious, Moses approached to see why the bush wasn't consumed. When God saw Moses coming closer, he called out, "Moses, Moses." Moses answered, "Here I am." God instructed him, "Don't come any closer. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses was afraid and hid his face. fearing to look at God. God told him, "I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt and heard their cries for help. I know their pain, and I have come down to rescue them and bring them to a good land, flowing with milk and honey. I am sending you, Moses, to go to Pharaoh and lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." Surprised, Moses asked, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God assured him, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain." Moses asked, "If I go to the Israelites and say, 'The God of your fathers has sent me,' and they ask, 'What is his name?' what should I tell them?" God replied, "I am who I am. Tell them, 'I am has sent me to you.'" He continued, "Tell the Israelites that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever." God instructed Moses to gather the leaders of Israel and share that he had seen their suffering and would bring them out of Egypt to a good land. God warned that Pharaoh wouldn't easily let them go, but he would demonstrate his power with miracles, and afterward, Pharaoh would allow their departure. One day, God spoke to Moses again. He commanded him to return to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go free. But Moses was afraid and said, "What if they don't believe me?" To reassure him, God gave Moses 3 miraculous signs. First, God instructed him to throw his staff on the ground, and it turned into a snake. Terrified, Moses ran away, but God told him to pick it up by the tail, and it transformed back into a staff. Next, God told Moses to place his hand inside his coat. When he took it out, his hand was covered in leprosy, but when he put it back in and pulled it out again, it was healed. Finally, God said that if the people still did not believe him, he could take water from the Nile River, pour it on the ground, and it would turn to blood. Despite these signs, Moses remained worried and said, "I don't speak very well." God promised to help him and mentioned that his brother Aaron could speak for him. Encouraged, Moses returned home and told his family what God had commanded. They all began their journey back to Egypt. When Moses and Aaron got to Egypt, they went to Pharaoh. They said, "The Lord says, 'Let my people go so they can worship me.'" But Pharaoh was very mean. He said, "No, I don't know your God, and I won't let the people go." Pharaoh was so angry that he made the Israelites work even harder. He told the men in charge of the Israelites to make them work day and night, but without giving them the materials they needed. The Israelites were sad and upset because of how hard their lives had become. Moses cried out to God, "Why did you send me if this is what's going to happen?" But God told Moses not to worry. He promised that soon Pharaoh would let the Israelites go. God told Moses again that he was going to save his people. He said, "I am the Lord, and I will take care of my people. I will free them from Egypt, and they will be my special people." Moses told the Israelites what God said, but they were too tired and sad to listen. Then God told Moses to go to Pharaoh again and tell him to let the Israelites go. But Moses was still nervous because he didn't think he spoke well enough. God said Aaron could help, and together they would show Pharaoh God's power. Moses and Aaron went back to Pharaoh. They said, "The Lord says, 'Let my people go.'" But Pharaoh didn't listen. So God told Aaron to throw his stick on the ground, and it turned into a snake. But Pharaoh's magicians did the same thing with their sticks. However, Aaron's snake swallowed up all their snakes. Still, Pharaoh wouldn't let the people go. Then God told Moses to meet Pharaoh by the river. Moses told Pharaoh, "Because you won't let God's people go, the water in the river will turn to blood." Moses stretched out his staff, and all the water in the river turned to blood. The fish died, and the water smelled terrible. But Pharaoh still refused to let the people go. God sent Moses to Pharaoh again. Moses said, "Let God's people go, or God will send frogs everywhere." Pharaoh didn't listen, so Aaron stretched out his hand, and frogs came out of the river. Frogs were everywhere. They were in people's houses, in their beds, and even in their ovens. Pharaoh was so upset that he called Moses and Aaron and said, "Pray to your God to take the frogs away, and I will let the people go." Moses prayed, and all the frogs died. But when the frogs were gone, Pharaoh changed his mind and wouldn't let the Israelites go. Then God told Moses to tell Aaron to hit the ground with his staff, and the dust turned into tiny bugs called lice. The lice were everywhere on people and animals. The magicians couldn't copy this miracle and said, "This is God's power." But Pharaoh's heart was still hard, and he wouldn't let the people go. Next, God sent swarms of flies. Flies flew into the houses and bothered everyone in Egypt, but God made sure there were no flies where the Israelites lived. Again, Pharaoh told Moses to ask God to take the flies away, and then he would let the Israelites go. But after the flies were gone, Pharaoh didn't keep his promise. God told Moses to warn Pharaoh again. He said, "If you don't let the people go, all your animals, your horses, cows, sheep, and camels will get very sick and die." And that's exactly what happened. All the Egyptians' animals died, but the Israelites' animals didn't get sick. Pharaoh still refused to listen, so God sent a new punishment. Moses threw ashes into the air, and they turned into painful sores called boils. Everyone in Egypt had these painful sores, even Pharaoh's magicians. But still, Pharaoh wouldn't let the people go. Then God sent another warning. Moses said, "If you don't let God's people go, tomorrow there will be a terrible hailstorm, the worst Egypt has ever seen." The next day, giant hailstones fell from the sky. They ruined crops, knocked down trees, and hurt people and animals. The only place without hail was where the Israelites lived. Pharaoh was scared and said he would let the people go, but once the storm stopped, he changed his mind again. Moses went back to Pharaoh. He said, "Let the people go, or God will send locusts, big bugs that will eat everything left in Egypt." Pharaoh's servants were worried and begged Pharaoh to listen, but Pharaoh still wouldn't let the people go. So God sent the locusts. They covered the land and ate every plant and tree that the hail hadn't destroyed. Pharaoh quickly called Moses and Aaron and said, "I've sinned. Ask your God to take the locusts away, and I'll let the people go." Moses prayed, and God sent a wind to blow all the locusts into the Red Sea. But once again, Pharaoh refused to keep his promise. Finally, God sent a terrible darkness over Egypt. For 3 days, the Egyptians couldn't see anything, but the Israelites had light where they lived. Pharaoh told Moses, "Go, take your people, but leave your animals here." Moses said, "No, we need the animals for sacrifices." Pharaoh got angry and told Moses to leave, and said, "The next time you see me, you'll die." Moses replied, "You're right, Pharaoh. You won't see me again." God told Moses he would bring one final plague to the Egyptians, which would compel Pharaoh to release the Israelites. He instructed Moses to prepare the people because that night, the firstborn child of every Egyptian family would die. However, the Israelites would be protected. Moses warned Pharaoh, but Pharaoh didn't listen. That night, just as God had said, the Egyptian families lost their firstborn, and there was immense sorrow. Overcome with grief, Pharaoh finally allowed the Israelites to leave. They quickly gathered their belongings and departed Egypt, as God had instructed. At last, they were free. God gave Moses and Aaron specific instructions for the Israelites. They were to prepare a special meal before leaving Egypt. They were to cook a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood, so God would know to protect their households. The Israelites followed these instructions, and once they were ready, they left Egypt, bringing with them bread made without yeast and other essentials for their journey. This marked the start of a new chapter in their lives, and God commanded them to remember this night forever. As the Israelites journeyed, God guided them with a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. He instructed them to never forget how he had saved them from slavery in Egypt and to celebrate his deliverance. God promised to bring them to a new land where they could live in peace and happiness. As the Israelites reached the Red Sea, Pharaoh changed his mind and sent his army to recapture them. Terrified, the Israelites complained to Moses, fearing they would be returned to slavery. Moses urged them to trust God. Then, following God's command, Moses stretched out his staff over the sea, and the waters parted. allowing the Israelites to cross on dry land. When the Egyptians pursued them, the waters returned, drowning Pharaoh's army. The Israelites were safe, and they praised God for their deliverance. As we continue on this journey together, I want to encourage you to smash the like button, click on the subscribe button below to subscribe to my channel, and most especially turn on the bell notification so that YouTube will notify you when I post the next video. After the miraculous escape at the Red Sea, the Israelites celebrated by singing and dancing. They were overjoyed to be free. However, as they traveled through the desert, they soon ran out of water and became thirsty, leading them to grumble to Moses once again. In response to their complaints, God provided food from heaven called manna. Each morning, the Israelites would gather the manna, just enough for the day. On the sixth day, they collected extra to last through the Sabbath, a day of rest. God commanded them not to gather food on the Sabbath, but when they tried, they found none. The Israelites reached another place where there was no water, and once again they complained to Moses. God instructed Moses to strike a rock with his staff, and water flowed from it, providing for the people. Later, the Israelites faced the Amalekites in battle. As long as Moses held his hands up, the Israelites prevailed. When he grew tired, Aaron and Hur helped hold his hands up, and the Israelites won the battle. Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, visited him and noticed that Moses was trying to handle everything by himself. Jethro suggested Moses appoint others to help him. Moses listened to the advice and selected wise and trustworthy leaders to share the responsibility of judging and solving problems. This made things easier for Moses and ensured the people received help more quickly. The Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai, where God told Moses he would meet with the people. Moses prepared them by instructing them to wash their clothes and get ready for this special encounter. On the third day, there were loud sounds, lightning, and thick clouds on the mountain as God spoke to Moses, giving him important commandments for the people to follow. These laws helped the Israelites understand how to live in a way that pleased God. God gave Moses 10 key commandments for the Israelites. 1. Worship only God. 2. Don't make or worship idols. 3. Honor God's name and use it respectfully. 4. Keep the Sabbath holy by resting and focusing on God. 5. Respect and honor your parents. 6. Do not kill or harm others. 7. Be faithful to your spouse. 8. Do not steal. 9. Always be truthful. 10. Do not covet what belongs to others. The people were in awe of God's powerful presence on the mountain and realized these commandments were important for living good lives and staying close to God. God gave Moses additional laws to help people live peacefully together. These rules explained how to address mistakes and conflicts. If someone accidentally hurt another, they were required to help them recover. There were also guidelines for dealing with intentional wrongs and ensuring servants were treated fairly. The laws focused on caring for one another and ensuring everyone was treated with justice and compassion. God continued providing more instructions, including how to deal with lost animals. If someone found a lost sheep or cow, they were to return it to the rightful owner. There were also rules about honesty and fairness. If someone damaged something that wasn't theirs, they needed to make it right. God emphasized treating the poor with kindness and ensuring everyone was cared for with fairness and respect. God gave further instructions, reminding the people to always be fair and truthful. He encouraged them to help others in need, even strangers. He also emphasized the importance of resting on the Sabbath to stay refreshed and ready to serve others. The people were instructed to share their resources with those in need and to always act with kindness and integrity. Moses shared God's commands with the people, and they agreed to follow them, promising to obey all that God had asked. Moses then returned to the mountain to receive more guidance from God. During this time, he experienced God's glory and learned more about how to lead the people in living justly and kindly. God gave Moses detailed instructions to build the tabernacle, a sacred place where people could connect with him. He also commanded Moses to make the Ark of the Covenant, a large box to hold sacred items. The ark was to be overlaid with gold and adorned with angels on top, making it exceptionally beautiful and holy. In addition, God instructed Moses to create a table for bread and a golden lampstand to provide light. Every item in the tabernacle was to be crafted with the utmost care and excellence. God then gave Moses guidance on how to construct the tabernacle itself. It was to be a grand tent made from luxurious curtains in shades of blue, purple, and red. These curtains, made from fine linen and goat's hair, were to be arranged in a specific way to protect and warm the tabernacle. Inside, there would be 2 rooms, one for sacred objects and another, even more special, to house God's presence. Next, God instructed Moses to build an altar, a dedicated space for making offerings. The altar, a large structure for presenting gifts like animals and special foods, was to be made of wood overlaid with brass. Special tools, such as shovels and pans, were also required. Surrounding the tabernacle, a large courtyard with tall curtains and pillars would create a space for worship and offering gifts to God. Finally, God told Moses to design beautiful garments for the priests, who would serve as intermediaries between the people and God. Aaron, the high priest, would wear an elaborate robe and a distinctive headdress. His garments were decorated with precious stones, each representing one of the 12 tribes of Israel, adding to the splendor and significance of the attire. These sacred garments were not just ornamental. They were essential for the priest's role in helping the people communicate with God. God gave specific instructions to prepare the priests for their sacred duties. Aaron and his sons were to be washed and dressed in their special garments. They were to present offerings, including a young bull and 2 rams, to atone for their sins. By placing their hands on the animals' heads, they symbolized offering them to God. These animals were then burned on the altar as an offering to God, signifying respect and gratitude. Aaron and his sons were now ready to serve in the tabernacle daily, assisting the people in their relationship with God. This process helped Moses and the Israelites understand how to live in harmony and maintain a special place for communion with God. God instructed Moses to build a special altar for burning incense, made of wood and covered in pure gold, to be placed before the curtain shielding the Ark of the Covenant. Incense would be burned on it every morning and evening. God also provided a recipe for sacred anointing oil, made from special spices, to bless the tabernacle, altar, and priests. A census was to be taken, with each person contributing a half-shekel coin to support the tabernacle, serving as a reminder that all were equal before God. Moses also received instructions to craft a bronze basin for the priests to wash their hands and feet, made from the mirrors donated by women serving at the tabernacle entrance. God selected Bezalel and Oholiab, skilled artisans, to oversee the construction of the tabernacle. They were filled with God's wisdom to ensure that everything was made precisely as God commanded. Additionally, God reminded Moses about the importance of the Sabbath, a day of rest set apart as holy, to serve as a perpetual sign between God and the Israelites. While Moses was on the mountain with God, the Israelites grew impatient and asked Aaron to create a new god for them. Aaron crafted a golden calf, and the people worshipped it, angering God. Moses descended from the mountain, saw their idolatry, and shattered the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments. He destroyed the calf, turned it to powder, and made the people drink it. Moses then pleaded with God to forgive the people, and though God agreed, he warned that there would still be consequences for their sin. Moses set up a special tent, the tent of meeting, outside the camp, where he would speak with God. The people would watch Moses as he entered and waited for him to return. God told Moses that he would send an angel to guide the Israelites to the promised land, but he would not accompany them due to their stubbornness. Moses insisted that God go with them, knowing they would be lost without him. God agreed and reassured Moses of his presence. Moses then asked to see God's glory, and while God allowed him to see his back, he said no one could see his face and live. God hid Moses in a rock as he passed by. God instructed Moses to cut 2 new stone tablets to replace the ones he had broken. On these, God wrote the 10 Commandments once again. As God passed by, He revealed his merciful and just nature, forgiving sins but holding accountable those who continue in rebellion. Moses spent 40 days and nights on the mountain without food or water. When he came down, his face radiated because he had been in God's presence. Moses gathered the people and told them about the offerings God requested for building the tabernacle. The people eagerly contributed gold, silver, bronze, and other valuable materials. The women spun yarn, while the leaders provided precious stones and spices. Everyone contributed willingly. Moses appointed Bezalel and Oholiab to lead the work, ensuring the tabernacle's items were made with great skill. Bezalel, Oholiab, and the skilled workers began constructing the tabernacle. They made fine linen curtains using blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fashioned the tabernacle's tent from goat's hair. The workers also crafted wooden boards covered in gold, along with bars and rings to hold everything together. The people were so generous with their offerings that there was more than enough, and Moses had to tell them to stop giving. Bezalel crafted the Ark of the Covenant from wood and covered it with gold. He made the mercy seat with 2 golden cherubim to be placed above the Ark and saw. He also made the table for the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand, and the altar of incense, all according to God's detailed instructions. The altar for burnt offerings was built from wood and overlaid with bronze. It was used for sacrifices. The workers also made the bronze basin for washing and constructed the court surrounding the tabernacle. All materials were used wisely, and the total amount of gold, silver, and bronze was recorded. The priest's garments were skillfully crafted, including the ephod, breastplate, and other holy attire for Aaron and his sons. The garments featured gold, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and the breastplate had 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Pomegranates and bells adorned the hem of the robe, signifying the priest's movements. When the work was completed, Moses inspected everything, ensuring it was done as God had commanded, and blessed the people for their dedication. Once everything was ready, God instructed Moses on how to set up the tabernacle. On the first day of the first month, Moses placed the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies, separated by a special curtain. The table for the bread of the presence was placed on the north side of the holy place, and the golden lampstand on the south. The altar of incense was positioned in front of the curtain. The bronze basin and altar of burnt offerings were placed in the courtyard. Moses anointed the tabernacle, altar, furnishings, and the priests with sacred oil, setting everything apart as holy. Once the tabernacle was complete and everything consecrated, the cloud of God's presence covered it, filling the space with his glory. When the cloud lifted, the Israelites would pack up and follow, and when it remained, they stayed. The tabernacle was now ready, serving as a holy place where God would dwell with his people. They were now prepared to continue their journey, guided by God's presence. It is good to allow God to lead and guide us. Even in times of trouble, we should always hold on to God. Click on the subscription button below to get notified on our next video. God bless you.